Hi there, history fans. So today we have a patron suggestion, and the video is called Creative Weapons of the Medieval Era. And of course the video is from Salmonella Academy. If you want to join Patreon, the link is going to be in the description below. And then you can suggest videos directly. If you want to be part of our community, just hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. As always, I'm going to give thoughts, opinions, additional information, things that I know. And if you want to correct me, add something, feel free to do it in the comment section. Okay, let's see what Salmonella has for us.
Hey kids, when most people think of the Middle Ages, they think of them as being like humanity's dumb teenage years, where all we did was play harpsichord in our room and burn heretics with our friends. But that's not entirely true. In fact, I would argue that the medieval era saw just as much genius as any other period in time. It's just most of that genius went towards finding new and creative ways to brutally slaughter those you disagree with. Here's a few highlights. First, we'll talk...
The thing is, with the medieval era, some call it the Dark Ages. Today is the 4th of July, so I'm just going to take some American examples. We're talking only about Europe. So the stratification of history in Europe. Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, but also Voltaire, Hume, Kant. They all thought that, the Middle Ages, the Middle Ages, because they were so keen to Christianity, that they actually reversed or slowed down human advancement because of the extra power that religion had in that time. But the question is, what do you consider the Middle Ages, and when was that established? Like the three partition of European history. It's a very interesting story, so bear with me. The thing is, okay, we all kind of agree that the Middle Ages start in the 5th century, so 1476, with the fall of the Western Roman Empire. But the things, or the way that some people in Europe, in different countries, are thought, it differs when it ends. So some say that it ended with Martin Luther and Wittenberg and his 95 Theses. Some say it ended with the exploration of the New World from Christopher Columbus. And some say it ended with the fall of Constantinople. So you had three conflicting, years when it ended. But approximately it's from the 5th to the 15th century, approximately. Okay, and the thing is, a lot of people throughout history later on wanted to stratify history, so historians and prominent people, and especially later on in the Renaissance period and especially in the Enlightenment and so on. And I mentioned some of them: Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, Hume, Voltaire, and so on, in their reasoning why they called it the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages. But then you had also a prominent figure that most of you heard of, and it's Petrarca. So he was actually a humanist, and he believed that, he divided the history of Europe into two groups. So you had the Antique era, so the pre-Christian era, and then you had the Era Nova, which is the new era in which he considered himself to live in, and he considered actually the Antique era the Light era. So the enlightened era, where a lot of philosophy was taught and so on and blah 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 blah. And he thought that the Era Nova was actually a dark age, because philosophy and science and so on didn't flourish that much. And then you had also Bruni, who started with the division, the three divisions of history in Europe, with the antique, medieval, and then so on. But he started it, but actually the one who kind of clarified the whole thing, let's call it that way, was actually a German historian called Cellarius, who then divided, who lived in the 18th century, 17th, something like that. Cellarius, look him up. Interesting dude. And he divided the European history into what we kind of orient into today. So it can, in history, there's always, how to say it, like not an exact line when something starts, when something ends. You cannot say exactly in this year medieval Europe starts, because it's a long process that has socioeconomic impacts, religious and so on, different influences from different spheres who vary in their significance. So it's always a census within historians or within the science, within historiography, when something started. Just a quick note. I think it's interesting. I know. I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting. And yeah, so he is going to talk about between the 5th and the 15th century. So 1,000 years approximately in probably Europe. But yeah, let's
new and creative ways to brutally slaughter those you disagree with. Here's a few highlights. First, we'll talk about the werewolf. So, as you can imagine, medieval castles were not easy to break into. They were basically like those jungle gym things at Chuck E. Cheese's. Massive in size, intentionally confusing layout, security everywhere, and by the end of your visit, you'd probably end up with some kind of disease. So in order to help penetrate fortresses, medieval armies would often utilize siege weapons, one of the most popular of which was the trebuchet. Now, this device is interesting enough on its own, but it gets better. So, around 1300 AD, King Edward I of England was in the process of invading Scotland. However, one fortress, known as Stirling Castle, was giving him a lot of trouble. He laid siege to the building for many months without any real progress. Then one day, he woke up and had a revelation. Hey guys, listen, why are we wasting our time building all these regular-sized trebuchets when we could just build one giant one and call it a day? So that's what he did. This gargantuan war machine was known as the Werewolf and stood at around 6 stories tall. To give a bit of perspective, this is about as tall as King Kong was in his largest film depiction. So basically, picture a giant fucking ape launching boulders like they're baseballs, and you've got a pretty good idea of what the werewolf was capable of.
Well, I mean, the thing is, yeah, in the Middle Ages, castles were the center of power. You had also feudalism and so on, but castles were the center of power. And it didn't matter that much if you took the landscape surrounding the castle, because the main army, and then you move on, because the main army from that castle, which hid in that castle from all the surroundings, and also the peasants and so on, which can also be utilized for giving more manpower to the army. But they were hiding in the castle, and then if you want to advance even further, you are practically leaving your supply line that's on the way, where the castle is on the way, vulnerable. So you needed to take the castles, and then you can move on to the next castle and the next checkpoint and so on. So yeah, and why would I can understand it. Maybe the castle had also some catapults or I don't know, trebuchets or something like that, where they could also fire back, because it was also a thing. But what? 6 stores. What?
Fucking ape launching boulders like they're baseballs, and you've got a pretty good idea of what the werewolf was capable of. It was so intimidating that when the Scots saw the English constructing the beast outside the castle, they immediately surrendered out of fear. But then Edward was like, "Ha, fuck that, I'm gonna test this bad boy out," and proceeded to take pot shots on the castle anyway.
You built it. Why not? That kind of reminds me of what is it called? Arbalist or something like that. Because in Latin, ballista means a throwing machine, like something that throws something. Arbalista was actually throwing arrows. And as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, they also constructed, huge arbalistas, which would, they would mount them on the castles. They would also use them for siege, but also in, you know, like direct conflicts on battlefields. So look it up. I mean, I could kind of tell you some interesting stuff that I know about different weapons, but the video would take, I don't know, hours. So I'm just gonna name some. But you look up in, you know, like in the internet or search it.
Product of the Middle Ages was a flammable substance known as Greek fire. Contrary to popular belief, Greek fire was not invented by the ancient Greeks. Rick Riordan, you lying prick. It was actually invented in the 7th century AD by the Byzantines, who happened to inhabit Greece at the time. Historians still don't know exactly what it was made of, but they do know that it acted a lot like napalm, sticking to ships, sticking to people, even floating and continuing to burn on the surface of the water. The Byzantines also had these siphon-like tubes that they'd put on the front of their boats to pour Greek fire on the enemy, kind of like makeshift flamethrowers. These were retired pretty quickly though, mostly because when you put the words makeshift and flamethrower next to each other, you're bound to run into some problems eventually. Our next bright idea comes from a woman known
Greek fire is maybe one of the most known, you know, like unusual weapons of that time period. But yeah, I really don't know from what it's made. But I know that the Byzantine Empire used it, and look at this way. A lot of the Byzantine main cities that they controlled was on the coastline. So you had Constantinople, you had also cities along the today's Croatian coast, Greece, you had also the today's Turkish coast, you know, like to the Aegean Sea. So a lot of the more influential cities were on the coastline. And to defend them, you need to also take into account naval you know, like to defeat naval enemies who come with vessels. So yeah, they invented that, but yeah, as far I don't know that much about the Greek fire. So let me know if you know something additional.
Olga of Kiev. So Olga was a princess who
look up Hellburner. It was described as wait, it was described like the Hellburner weapon. It was used a little bit later, I think in the 16th or 17th century or something like that. But it was called one of the first mass killing, mass murdering weapons. It was basically a ship loaded with tons and tons and tons of black powder, and it would just be sent on a suicide mission to the enemy naval force. Hellburner, look it up. It's quite interesting.
Eventually. Our next bright idea comes from a woman known as Olga of Kiev. So Olga was a princess who ruled the area around the capital of modern-day Ukraine from 945 to 963 AD. And she had quite a track record for being just a total badass. For example, the Drevlians, a tribe of people under Kiev's control, once sent 20 men to Kiev in order to convince Olga to marry their prince, under the pretense that if they did marry, the prince could claim her rule over Kiev. In response, she had all 20 of them buried alive. She then sent a letter to the prince saying she accepted his proposal, but she would need a bunch of his most distinguished governors to escort her on the journey. Once the men showed up, Olga was like, "Hey guys, long journey, huh? How'd you like to take a bath in this here bathhouse?" They were like, "Yeah, sure, that sounds great." "Okay, have fun, you guys." Man, it's like a sauna in here. It is a sauna, dipshit. You have a point. So long story short, this lady just did not give a heck. My favorite story about her starts with her besieging a Drevlian city that refused to pay tribute to her. The people in the city were already well aware of the type of rampaging that Olga was capable of, so they were already scared shitless. But when she showed up, she was like, "Alright, you know what guys, I'm gonna play nice.
What is
just
she going to do now?
bring me 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each household and I'll be on my way." Okay. What are they for exactly? We're just hungry. I mean, we got some food too. We could just give... I'm sorry, did I fucking stutter? Alright, birds it is. Then, once the creatures were in Olga's hands, she had each of her soldiers tie a cloth-bound piece of sulfur to one of the birds' feet, which was then set alight. The birds were then released all at once, and when they flew back into the city, their nests acted like little piles of tinder, resulting in nearly every house in the entire city erupting in flames simultaneously. And while the whole place burned to the ground, Olga just sat and watched. By the way, it's worth mentioning that...
Kinda evil, but also genius. Props to that. I mean, not props to her, but to the tactic.
After her death, Olga was canonized as a Catholic saint, presumably around the same time as Saint Tiffany, who went around pushing in the soft spots of babies, and Saint Jerry the Goat Fucker, who, as the name implies, fucked a lot of goats. In conclusion, pay your taxes. To my loyal subscribers, I'll see you in 3 months. I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching.
Nice. I'm trying to remember another weapon that's kind of interesting. I can't remember any medieval weapon right now, but one also that comes into my mind, like a crazy weapon, but also interesting. It's the claws of Archimedes, like the Greek dude. It was used against the Romans by what is the English term? Carthaginians, Carthago. They would basically, it was a big claw that was hanging from the walls, and it would just grab a ship and then pull it up and then sank it. It's quite interesting. So yeah, Salmonella, you never know what to expect from his videos, but you can always expect to have a laugh and that the videos are actually great and that you're going to hear something that you never heard of. I'm especially surprised with Olga and the story with the birds. I mean, it's evil, but it's genius. The tactic is genius. And yeah, most of the houses weren't, like you didn't have the modern, like structural, you need to build it with this way and this angle. The roof needs to be that way and that way. But also like houses inside of towns and castles and so on. Some of them were also built with wood. So, good tactic. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed it. If you want to be part of our community, just hit the subscribe button, notification bell. If you want to be a patron member, link is in the description below. Check it out. And until next time, see ya.